The first light of dawn was just beginning to touch the city, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and gray. For Officer Ben Walker, the day started not with an alarm, but with the familiar weight of his duty belt and the steady readiness of another shift. His partner was already waiting by the door, a patient, powerful shape in the dim hallway. Coda, a German shepherd with a coat like shadow and intelligence gleaming in his deep brown eyes, gave a low, soft whine of greeting. His entire body quivered with a readiness that never seemed to fade. "I know, buddy," Ben murmured, running a hand over the dog's powerful shoulders. Time to go to work. Their drive to Grand Central Station was a quiet ritual. The city woke up around them. Shopkeepers raising gates, the first trucks rumbling down empty streets. Ben glanced in the rearview mirror at Coda, who sat perfectly upright in his specialized harness, watching the world go by with a steady look. Theirs was a bond forged over 6 years, a partnership built on silent communication and unwavering trust. They had faced down armed robbers, located missing seniors in vast parks, and diffused tense standoffs. Ben felt a familiar twinge in his gut, the one that usually meant a quiet day wouldn't stay quiet. By the time they arrived, the station was a living, breathing entity of sound and motion. The grand, vaulted ceilings amplified the chaos into a constant, rhythmic hum. Thousands of footsteps and voices in a dozen languages created a constant hum on the marble floors. The air itself was a mixture of stale coffee, fresh pastries, and the faint, metallic scent of the trains below. Ben adjusted his uniform cap, the fabric familiar and firm against his forehead. He clipped the leash to Coda's harness, feeling the familiar, reassuring pull. Coda fell into step beside him, his posture relaxed yet supremely alert. The dog's police vest was a beacon, drawing smiles from children and respectful nods from adults. They were a familiar sight, a symbol of order in the beautiful chaos of the terminal. They began their patrol, moving through the main concourse with practiced, fluid rhythm. Ben's eyes were in constant motion, a subtle dance between acknowledging the public and assessing the environment. He watched the body language of the crowd, the harried businessman shouting into his phone, the group of students laughing too loudly to mask their travel anxiety, the elderly couple sitting perfectly still on a bench, their hands clasped tightly together. Coda was his living, breathing sensor. Coda's nose twitched. He sampled hundreds of scents every minute. His ears swiveled, catching sounds Ben could never hear. He was processing a world of invisible information. Ben paused near the west balcony, letting Coda investigate a row of trash bins and benches. The dog's tail swayed in a lazy, metronomic rhythm, a sign that everything was, for the moment, as it should be. A young woman in a uniform rushed past, nearly spilling her coffee. A mother jiggled a crying infant on her hip, humming a soft lullaby. It was all so normal, so routine. Just another quiet day, huh, Coda? Ben said, more to himself than to the dog. Coda's ears flicked backward at the sound of his handler's voice, a brief acknowledgement, but his look never left the flowing river of people. He was a student of movement, reading the currents and eddies of the crowd for any anomaly, any break in the pattern. Then, the station's loudspeaker crackled, its digital voice cutting to the din, "Attention passengers. The 8:05 coastliner service to Boston is now boarding on track 19. The announcement acted like a starting pistol. The crowd's energy shifted instantly, transforming from meandering flow into a determined rushing current. Ben straightened his back, his grip on Coda's leash instinctively tightening. To anyone watching, they were a picture of professional calm. But beneath the surface, Ben's senses were dialed to a higher frequency, and Coda, ever the vigilant guardian, scanned the faces ahead with a focus that was both patient and intense. Neither of them could have known that in less than an hour their quiet, ordinary patrol would be shattered. A single silent signal from a scared little girl was about to plunge them into a race against time, testing the very limits of their bond and proving that some cries for help are too quiet for human ears, but loud enough for a hero's heart to hear. The tidal wave of passengers heading for the Boston train began to recede, leaving the main concourse momentarily less chaotic. But the station's rhythm never truly stilled. It simply found a new tempo. Ben and Coda resumed their patrol, moving with a synchronized pace that spoke of years working side by side. Ben's boots made a soft, Steady sound on the polished floor, a beat matched by the gentle click of Coda's claws. The dog was a master of observation. While Ben processed the world in broad strokes, a nervous glance, a misplaced bag, Coda lived in a universe of microscopic details. He could filter through the overwhelming cocktail of scents to find the one note of fierce sweat, of aggression, of deception. He could hear a heartbeat quicken from 20 feet away. Right now. His senses were open, a net cast wide, sorting and dismissing the thousands of data points that made up a normal morning. It was near the bank of ticket kiosks that the first ripple of discord touched him. Coda's head lifted sharply. His nostrils flared. His easy walk slowed to a stop. Ben felt a change through the leash, a subtle stiffening, a new tension in the connection between them. He didn't need to look down. He knew his partner's language. "What's up, boy?" Ben asked, his voice low and calm, not wanting to alert the crowd around them. "You got something?" Coda's response was a soft, almost inaudible chuff of air. His gaze, previously sweeping gently, had now narrowed, laser focused on a point across the concourse. Ben followed the line of sight. His eyes landed on a family group, a woman in a bright red winter coat, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She held the hands of two older children, a boy and a girl, who looked bored and restless. But it was the third child, the smallest one, who snagged Ben's attention. A little girl with messy blonde pigtails, trailing a step behind. The woman's grip on the little girl's hand was tight, her knuckles white. The girl struggled to keep up. Something about the dynamic felt off. The woman moved with a brisk, efficient pace, her head constantly on a swivel, not looking at the magnificent architecture or the departure boards, but scanning the faces of the people around her. She wasn't navigating the crowd. She was fighting through it. The little girl, however, was a study in hesitation. Her steps were small and faltering. Every few seconds, she would glance up at the woman, her expression unreadable from this distance, but her body language screamed unease. She wasn't dragging her feet in a tantrum. It was as if an invisible weight was tied to her ankles. Ben watched as the girl's free hand, the one not holding the woman's, twitched at her side. Her lips moved, forming silent words that were swallowed by the station's noise. Coda let out another low sound, this one a rumble deep in his chest. It wasn't a growl of fret, but one of intense concentration. His entire body was now oriented toward the family, his muscles coiled like springs. The leash was taut, a straight line of communication between man and dog. "Easy, Coda," Ben murmured, his own instincts now humming. He'd learned the hard way to never, ever ignore that feeling or the signals Coda was sending. The dog wasn't trained to alert to lost children or family squabbles. He was trained to find danger, contraband, and the subtle signs of human distress that preceded violence. The woman, feeling the weight of their attention, glanced over. For a split second, her eyes, a flat, cool gray, met Ben's. She offered a tight, fleeting smile that didn't reach her eyes, and then quickly looked away, pulling the little girl closer. The gesture was meant to look maternal, protective, but to Ben it looked possessive, controlling. The little girl stumbled over a crack in the floor, her knees buckling slightly. The woman didn't stop to check on her. She didn't lean down and ask if she was okay. She just gave the small arm a sharp, impatient tug, forcing the child back into step. The action was so jarring, so devoid of warmth, that Ben felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Coda reacted instantly. Coda's head lowered. His tail stood rigid. A low, vibrating growl escaped his throat, a clear, professional warning. People nearby began to notice. A man in a suit glanced over, his phone conversation pausing. A couple sharing a coffee looked up, their expressions shifting from casual to concerned. The woman in the red coat felt the change in the atmosphere. She picked up her pace, weaving through the crowd with new urgency, her 3 children in tow. The little girl looked back over her shoulder, and for one heartbreaking moment her eyes, wide blue and filled with a silent terror, locked directly with Ben's. It was a look that bypassed his training and went straight to his core. It was a cry for help without a single sound. Ben's grip on the leash tightened. The routine of the morning had shattered. Coda was pulling forward now, not with the brute force of chase, but with the undeniable certainty of a mission. The dog had found the unseen current of fear running beneath the station's calm surface, and he was determined to follow it to its source. The world seemed to narrow, the noise of the station fading into a dull, distant roar. For Ben, there was only the taut leash in his hand, the rigid line of Coda's back, and a retreating flash of the little girl's red coat as she was pulled to the forest of strangers. Coda was a force of nature on the end of the lead, his entire being focused on the family ahead. He didn't strain wildly. His pull was steady, powerful, and insistent, like a river current, impossible to hold back for long. "I see them, partner. I see them," Ben said, his voice a low anchor for both of them. He quickened his pace, allowing Coda to guide him. The crowd, sensing the purpose in their movement, instinctively parted. The dynamic had shifted entirely. They were no longer just patrolling. They were hunting, and the prey was the truth. The woman was heading for the South Corridor, a slightly less crowded route that led to the commuter train platforms. Her pace was hurried, and she kept glancing back, her earlier composure beginning to fray at the edges. Each time she looked, her eyes would dart to Ben and the determined German shepherd, and a flicker of panic would cross her face before she masked it. Coda's growl deepened, becoming a continuous, low rumble that Ben felt vibrate up the leash and into his bones. It was a sound of escalating alarm. Then it happened. The little girl, stumbling slightly to keep up, lifted her free hand. It wasn't a wave or a grab for balance. With a deliberate, subtle movement, she tapped her small fingers 5 times against the woman's back. Asterisk tap, 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 tap. Asterisk a brief pause, then the sequence repeated. Asterisk tap, 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 asterisk. It was a pattern, a code. Ben's breath caught in his throat. Asterisk 5 taps. A signal. Asterisk he had attended briefings on this very thing. The silent, desperate signals used by victims, especially children, trapped in unthinkable situations. Signals for help when speaking was too dangerous. His mind raced, recalling training videos. A hand on the neck, a specific number of taps, a repeated gesture. This was it. This was the anomaly Coda had sensed long before any human could have recognized it. The dog had seen it too. The moment the girl's hand completed the second sequence, Coda froze. His growl cut off abruptly, replaced by an intense, breathless silence. He planted all 4 paws firmly on the ground, becoming an immovable statue of fur and focus. His eyes, burning with intelligence, were locked on the girl, reading the terrified tremble in her shoulders, the way she held her head. "Coda?" Ben whispered, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Talk to me?" In response, Coda let out a single, sharp bark. It was a signal Ben knew well. Confirmation. Asterisk confirming the threat. Asterisk. The sound cut through the air like a gunshot. The woman in red flinched violently, spinning around. Her face was a pale mask of forced indignation. "What is your problem?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "Why is your dog harassing us?" Ben held up a placating hand, his own voice deliberately calm and professional, a stark contrast to her rising pitch. "Ma'am, we're just conducting a routine patrol. My partner is trained to detect certain behaviors." His eyes flicked from her to the little girl, who had shrunk behind the woman's legs. The child was trembling, her small hands clenched into fists at her sides. Coda took a single, deliberate step forward. He didn't lunge or snap. He simply advanced, his presence itself a boundary she could not cross. His gaze was fixed on the girl, and in that moment, something incredible happened. The little girl, her eyes wide with fear, looked directly at Coda, and for a fleeting second, her expression changed. The terror was still there, but it was mingled with something else, a spark of recognition, a flicker of hope. She knew the dog was there for her. The woman tried to pull her along. "We're going to miss our train. This is ridiculous." But Coda stood his ground, a low warning growl returning to his throat. The message was clear. You are not leaving. The atmosphere crackled with tension. Passengers had stopped completely now, forming a loose, curious circle around them. Phones were raised, recording the standoff. Ben could feel dozens of eyes on him, waiting for his next move. His training warred with his instinct. Procedure said to de-escalate, to question calmly. But every fiber of his being and the unwavering certainty of his partner screamed that this was a rescue mission, not an interrogation. He looked down at Coda, at the absolute conviction in the dog's posture. He made a decision. "Ma'am," Ben said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "I need you to stop right there. We're not going anywhere until we have a talk." For a long, suspended moment, nobody moved. The woman in the red coat stood frozen, her body angled away from Ben as if poised for flight. The two older children had stopped fidgeting and now stared with wide, confused eyes. But the little girl with the blonde pigtails, she was looking at Coda. A silent conversation was passing between the child and the dog, a language built on pure instinct and need. The woman found her voice first, lacing it with practiced, wounded anger. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're terrifying my children. I want your badge number." Ben remained calm, his posture relaxed but authoritative. He'd been through confrontations before. Bluster was often the first defense of the guilty. "Ma'am, my badge number is 714. But right now my K9 partner is indicating on you. We need to clear this up. Now." He took a slow, deliberate step forward. Coda mirrored him, his movement fluid and synchronized. The dog's eyes never left the little girl, but his body was positioned to block the woman's path. His low growl had subsided into a tense, watchful silence, but the energy radiating from him was palpable, a live wire protective intent. "Indicating what?" the woman snapped, her voice cracking with a tremor she couldn't quite suppress. "We're a family. This is insane." Her eyes darted toward the corridor exit again, calculating the distance. Ben followed her gaze, then looked back at the little girl. She had taken a tiny, almost imperceptible step away from the woman. Her lower lip quivered and her eyes, still locked on Coda, were glistening with unshed tears. She was shaking her head, a minute, desperate motion. "No, don't let us go." Then her lips moved. No sound came out, but Ben, trained to read lips in noisy environments, saw the shapes they formed. "Help. Us." A cold jolt shot down Ben's spine. This was no longer a suspicion. It was a confirmation. The taps, the fear, the silent plea. Coda had been right from the beginning. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to place your bag on the ground, please," Ben said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. He kept his hands visible, non-threatening, but his stance was firm. "No!" The word burst from her, sharp and panicked. "You have no right. This is my private property." She hugged the bag even tighter, her knuckles white. The over-the-top reaction was more telling than any confession. The crowd around them was growing, their murmurs forming a wall of sound. Ben knew he had controlled the scene before it escalated further. "I have every right when my partner, a certified law enforcement officer, gives me probable cause," Ben stated clearly, for the benefit of the woman and the witnesses. "Now, for the last time, place the bag on the ground." Coda, sensing the climax of the standoff, let out a single, piercing bark. It was a sound of pure authority that echoed off the marble walls and made several people in the crowd jump. The little girl flinched, but she didn't look away from the dog. Instead, a single tear escaped and traced a clean path through the dust on her cheek. She nodded at him, just once, a gesture of thanks, of trust. That tiny nod shattered the woman's remaining composure. Seeing her control over the child slip away, seeing the unwavering resolve in the officer and his dog, she broke. Her shoulders slumped, and the defiant anger in her eyes melted into raw, undiluted fear. "Please," she whispered, her voice suddenly small and broken. "You don't understand. They'll—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Her eyes filled with a different kind of terror, one that spoke of threats far beyond this terminal. But Ben's focus was on the child. The immediate danger was here. He took another step, now within arm's reach. The bag, now, with trembling hands, her body seeming to deflate, the woman slowly slid the beige toe from her shoulder and let it drop to the floor with a soft thud. The sound was final. It was the end of her escape and the beginning of the unraveling truth. Coda immediately sat his job for the moment complete. He looked up at Ben, his tail giving two slow, deliberate thumps against the floor. The message was clear. The immediate threat is contained. But his watchful eyes remained on the little girl, his presence a silent promise that she was now under his protection. The silence that followed the soft thud of the bag hitting the floor was heavier and more profound than any noise in the station. It was a vacuum, sucking in the tension and holding it tight. All eyes were fixed on the beige tote bag, an ordinary object that had suddenly become the center of a terrifying mystery. Ben kept his gaze locked on the woman. Her earlier defiance had completely evaporated, replaced by a pale, sweating fear. She looked like a cornered animal, her eyes darting wildly, no longer looking for an escape route, but as if she was expecting someone or something to emerge in the crowd and intervene. The two older children had gone quiet and still, sensing the seismic shift in the adult they were with. "Thank you, ma'am," Ben said, his voice low but carrying in the hush. He maintained a safe distance, his training dictating that he never turn his back on a subject, especially one so volatile. He keyed the microphone on his shoulder radio. "Dispatch, this is 714. I need a second unit at my location, South Corridor near the commuter platforms. We have a detained individual and a potential situation involving a minor." The crackle of the dispatcher's acknowledgement was the only official sound in the space. The crowd, now a semicircle of onlookers, seemed to lean in collectively. Ben's attention then turned to Coda. The dog was the picture of controlled readiness. He had not moved from his seated position, but his entire being was focused on the woman, ready to react to the slightest aggressive twitch. Ben gave a subtle hand signal, a flat palm held low. "Stay. Watch." With that, Ben slowly knelt beside the bag. The air around it seemed to vibrate with unspoken secrets. He could feel the weight of the little girl's stare, pleading and hopeful. He could feel the woman's panicked gaze, desperate and defeated. He pulled a pair of black tactical gloves from his belt, the sound of the latex snapping against his wrists unnaturally loud. "I'm now going to inspect the bag," he announced, for the benefit of the recording phones and any future official review. His first touch was careful. He felt the outside, noting there were no hard, weapon-like shapes. Then his fingers found the zipper. The sound it made as he pulled it open was excruciatingly slow, a metallic rasp that seemed to scratch at the nerves of everyone present. The initial contents were simple: neatly folded children's clothes, a box of granola bars, a worn blue fleece blanket. It was the stuff a mom would pack for a trip, but something about the neatness felt forced, like a stage set. Ben carefully moved the top layer aside. His fingers brushed against something cold and hard. He paused, then slowly extracted a cheap, prepaid mobile phone. It was an older model, the kind you buy with cash. He turned it over. The back casing was sealed with thick, black tape. No SIM card slot was visible. He held it up for the woman to see. "Care to explain this?" She shook her head mutely, her throat working as if she were trying to swallow a stone. A soft whine from Coda drew Ben's attention back to the bag. The dog's nose was twitching, his head tilted. He wasn't looking at the phone. He was staring at the bottom of the tote, his focus intense. "There's more." Ben reached in again, past the blanket. His fingertips met the rough texture of paper. He closed his hand around a thick stack and pulled it out. It was a bundle of passports and driver's licenses. He fanned them out on the floor. Each one had a different name, but every photograph was the same woman. The one in the red coat, her face staring back with a variety of forced, unconvincing smiles. A unified gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a surge of agitated murmuring. Ben's jaw tightened. This was far beyond a simple custody dispute. His heart hammered against his ribs as he continued to search. From a hidden interior pocket, his fingers closed around a small, stiff envelope. As he pulled it out, a few of the contents slipped free, fluttering to the floor like poisonous leaves. Photographs. They were grainy, taken from a distance. They showed children in parks, outside schools. Some were smiling. Others had the same haunted look as the little girl standing just a few feet away. The woman let out a strangled cry. Those are just family pictures. But it was too late. The story she had built was in ashes. The little girl, seeing the photos on the ground, began to cry in earnest, silent, heaving sobs that shook her small frame. She pointed a trembling finger at one of the images. That's Michael," she whispered, her voice a broken thread of sound. "But he never came back." In that moment, the last piece of the horrible puzzle clicked into place for Ben. This wasn't just about one girl. This was about a network. This was about children who disappeared and never came back. He looked from the terrified woman to the damning evidence on the floor, and then to his partner. Coda met his gaze, his intelligent eyes seeming to understand the gravity of what they had just uncovered. The routine morning was gone, replaced by the chilling dawn of a nightmare they were only just beginning to understand. The little girl's whispered words, "But he never came back," hung in the air, a damning verdict that silenced the last of the crowd's murmurs. The scene was no longer just a police stop. It had become the public unraveling of a nightmare. Ben's training kicked into a higher gear. The evidence on the floor transformed the woman from a person of interest into a high-value suspect. The situation was now incredibly volatile. "Ma'am, turn around and place your hands on your head," Ben commanded, his voice leaving no room for dispute. The woman, whose real name was clearly not any of the ones on the passports, stared at him with hollow eyes. The fight had drained out of her, replaced by a terrifying, resigned emptiness. She slowly complied, her movements robotic. As Ben secured her wrists with plastic ties, he spoke into his radio again, his tone urgent. "Dispatch 714. Upgrade to Code 30. We have confirmed evidence of a possible child trafficking operation. I need detectives and CSU on scene immediately. Secure the perimeter." The response was instant, the dispatcher's voice sharp with renewed intensity. Across the terminal, other officers who had been monitoring the situation now moved with purpose, their casual strolls becoming directed strides. They began cordoning off the area with official wide-roll police tape, gently urging the crowd to move back. Throughout it all, Coda remained a steady anchor. He positioned himself between the secured woman and the little girl, a living, breathing barrier. His job was no longer to detect, but to protect. He watched the woman with unwavering attention, but his body was angled slightly toward the child, a silent promise of safety. Ben knelt again, this time in front of the little girl. He needed to get her away from this scene, and he needed a name. He kept his voice soft, a gentle contrast to the authority he'd used moments before. "Hey there," he said, his smile careful and warm. "My name's Ben. This is my partner, Coda. What's your name?" The girl looked from Ben's kind eyes to Coda's calm, panting face. The dog gave a soft, encouraging whine and thumped his tail once on the floor. It was the permission she needed. "Lily," she stammered, her voice tiny. "Hi, Lily. That a beautiful name." Ben said, "You are so brave. I need you to be brave for just a little bit longer, okay? I'm going to have a nice officer take you to a safe, quiet place where you can sit down. Would that be okay?" Lily nodded hesitantly. Her small hand reached out. Coda leaned into her touch. She was safe. A female officer, Officer Reyes, approached slowly, her uniform jacket off to appear less intimidating. She smiled warmly at Lily. "Hey, sweetie, I've got some apple juice and a super comfy chair back in our office. How about we go there, and you can tell me all about your favorite cartoons? Maybe this handsome guy can come with us for a little while," she added, nodding toward Coda. Ben gave a slight nod of approval. Coda, sensing the shift in objective, stood and fell into step beside Lily as Officer Reyes led her away, his presence a tangible shield against her fear. With the child safe, Ben's focus returned to the suspect. Two detectives in plain clothes had arrived, their sharp eyes taking in the scattered passports and photos. The lead detective, a grim-faced man named Inspector Miller, crouched down to examine the evidence. Multiple aliases, photos of minors, a burner phone. Miller muttered, bagging the phone with gloved hands. This was a cell, organized. She wasn't working alone. The woman, now sitting on a bench with her head bowed, began to cry. But these weren't performative tears from earlier. These were deep, ragged sobs of utter defeat and fear. "You don't understand," she wept, her words barely intelligible. They have my son. They said if I didn't do this, if I didn't bring them new children, they'd hurt him. They told me where to go, who to take. The phone, it only receives messages. I never know who's sending them. Silence fell around them. The horror of her situation. A mother forced to victimize other children to save her own, sank into the space between them. Ben felt a complicated twist of emotions. Pity for a mother coerced with her child's life, but a colder, fiercer anger for the children she had victimized in turn. The moral landscape had just become murky and horrifying. Inspector Miller wasn't as moved. "What's your real name?" he asked, his voice flat and hard. "Dana," she choked out. "Dana Voss." Miller's eyes narrowed in recognition. He stood up and pulled Ben aside, his voice dropping. "Voss! She's on a watch list. Suspected associate in a multi-state trafficking ring. We've been looking for a break like this for months." He glanced over at Coda, who was now sitting dutifully by the security office door where Lily had been taken. "Your dog, he didn't just save one little girl today. He might have just handed us the key to breaking the whole thing wide open." Ben looked at his partner, who was calmly watching the chaotic scene he had set into motion. The German shepherd's chest was puffed out just slightly, his head high. He wasn't seeking praise. He was simply satisfied in the knowledge that his job was done. The knot of children in the photos, the ghost of Michael who never came back, the terrified face of Lily. It was a web of darkness that human eyes had missed. But Coda's heart had seen it. He had heard the silent scream and answered with a roar, and in doing so, had torn the first thread in a tapestry of evil. The police station's briefing room hummed with a tense, focused energy that was a world away from the chaotic public scene at the terminal. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and whiteboard markers. Ben sat in a corner, a steaming mug untouched in front of him. Coda lay at his feet, not asleep, but in a state of deep rest, his ears still occasionally twitching at the sound of ringing phones and hurried footsteps in the hallway. The dog's work was done for now, but his body was still humming with the residual adrenaline of the morning. Inspector Miller stood at the front of the room, next to a large digital map of the city that was now dotted with glowing red pins. Each pin represented a location linked to Dana Voss, the bus station, a budget motel on the interstate, a self-storage facility, and now, Grand Central Terminal. "People, listen up," Miller began, his voice gravelly and tired but sharp with intent. "The suspect, Dana Voss, is talking. She's scared, and she's giving us what she can. This wasn't a solo operation. This was a cell. Organized." He clicked a remote, and a grainy, blown-up image from one of the found photographs appeared on the screen. A boy of about 8 with freckles and a missing front tooth. "This is Michael Roberts. Missing for 3 weeks. Lily confirmed it. He was one of hers." The word hers landed in the room with a sickening weight. Ben felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. One of hers. The casual horror of the phrase was overwhelming. Miller continued. "The phone we recovered is key. It's a one-way device. It only receives messages. We can't send anything. The messages wipe themselves clean. Instructions, times, locations. She was a puppet. Another click. The screen now showed a log of data, cell tower pings from the prepaid phone over the last 48 hours. The last message came in at 4:37 this morning. It gave her the train schedule and identified Lily as the target. But look here." He zoomed in on the map, where a cluster of pings glowed brightly in a rundown industrial sector on the city's outskirts. "This is the source. For the last week, every message has come from here. An old warehouse district, mostly abandoned." A wave of understanding passed through the room. This was more than a lead. It was a destination. "The pattern is clear," Miller said, his voice dropping. She was a collector. She would be given a target, make the grab, and then transport them to a drop point. We believe the warehouse is that drop point, a holding area before the children are moved further down the chain. The grim implication hung in the air. Moved further down the chain, the children wouldn't just be lost. They would disappear into a shadow world, their identities erased. Just then, the door to the briefing room swung open. A young tech from the digital forensics unit strode in, her face flushed with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. She held up the tape-shut phone. "We got a live one," she announced. We couldn't break the encryption on the old messages, but we managed to intercept a new incoming signal. "It's active." The room fell utterly silent. "It's a coordinates ping repeating. It's not a message for her. It's a beacon. Someone else has a phone like this, and it's active right now in the warehouse." She connected the phone to a laptop, and a moment later, a new, pulsing blue appeared on a large screen map. It was located precisely in the heart of the abandoned warehouse district. "I think it's been activated from inside the warehouse itself." Inspector Miller's eyes locked onto the pulsing dot. "They're active right now. They're moving children." The clinical term couldn't disguise the chilling reality. He turned to the assembled team, his expression granite. "That's our target. We assault in 30 minutes. Full tactical gear. This is a rescue operation, people. The primary objective is the safe recovery of any and all children inside." As the room erupted into controlled chaos, officers grabbing vests, checking weapons, and forming into teams, Ben looked down at Coda. The dog was already on his feet, having sensed the shift in the room's energy. He looked up at Ben, his head cocked, his eyes asking a single, clear question. "Is it time?" Ben knelt, running a hand along Coda's sturdy back, feeling the powerful muscles beneath the fur. The dog's alertness had sparked this entire operation. His unwavering focus on a little girl's silent tap had led them here, to the edge of a dark labyrinth. "You heard the man, partner," Ben whispered, his voice thick with a mixture of dread and determination. "We're not done yet. We're going to find them." Coda pressed his head into Ben's chest, a solid, reassuring weight. Then he let out a soft, determined woof, his signal that he was ready. The chase that began in the bright, noisy station was now leading them into the silent, waiting dark. 30 minutes later, the world had narrowed to the interior of an armored truck, the air smelling of sweat, diesel, and gun oil. Ben sat on a hard bench, the rhythmic vibration of the engine traveling up his spine. Across from him, Coda was a vision of focused calm, nestled securely in his custom harness. The dog's dark eyes were fixed on Ben, reflecting the dim red interior light. He was in his element, the tension in the air a familiar prelude to action. Ben ran a hand over Coda's tactical vest, checking the fastenings for the 10th time. The vest was heavier now, equipped with a small camera and a light. "You know the drill, buddy," Ben murmured, his voice barely a whisper over the rumble of the engine. "Find the kids. Keep them safe. We're bringing them home." Coda responded by leaning his head forward, resting his muzzle on Ben's knee, a gesture of absolute trust. Inspector Miller's voice crackled through the comms unit in Ben's ear. "Echo team, listen up. We are 2 minutes out. The warehouse is a single-story, corrugated steel structure. Intel suggests one main entrance on the north side and a smaller loading bay on the east. Thermal is picking up multiple heat signatures inside, clustered in the northwest corner. We have to assume the subjects are armed and the children are present. Precision and speed are critical." The convoy of black, unmarked vehicles slid through the industrial district like ghosts. Outside the reinforced windows, the world was a monochrome of decaying concrete, chain-link fences, and deep, pooling shadows. Streetlights were few and far between, their sickly yellow glow doing little to push back the oppressive darkness. It was a place forgotten by time, perfect for hiding terrible secrets. The truck came to a silent, rolling stop a block away from the target. The back doors opened and the cool, damp night air flooded in, carrying the scent of rust and stagnant water. The tactical team moved with a fluid, silent efficiency, fanning out to establish perimeter. Ben clipped Coda's leash and let him out. The dog's paws made no sound on the cracked asphalt. His head was up, ears swiveling, nose sampling the air. He was processing 1,000 streams of data, building a picture of the environment that was far richer than any human could perceive. "Coda's on point," Ben whispered into his mic. "We're going into the east loading bay." The team moved as one, a coordinated shadow flowing through the skeletal remains of old machinery and discarded pallets. The warehouse loomed ahead, a hulking silhouette against the slightly less dark sky. A single, dim light glowed from a grimy window high up on one wall. As they approached the rusted metal door of the loading bay, Coda's behavior changed. He slowed, his body lowering into a stalking posture. A low, guttural growl rumbled in his chest. So quiet Ben felt it more than heard it. He was alerting, not to a specific scent of explosives or drugs, but to the pervasive, primal scent of fear and human misery. Coda's alerting. He senses them, Ben reported. The breacher on the team nodded, placing a compact charge around the door's lock. The team stacked up behind them, a human wall of body armor and resolve. On my mark. The team leader's voice was a calm, steady pulse in Ben's ear. 3, 2, 1 breach. There was a sharp, concussive crack that was swallowed by the vast emptiness of the district. The door flew inward, and the team surged forward into the darkness. The inside of the warehouse was a cavern of echoes and shadows. The air was cold and thick with the smells of dust, mold, and something else, the sour tang of unwashed bodies and fear. The beam of Ben's flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing a vast, empty space littered with debris. Then, from the far corner, a sound, a muffled whimper. Coda lunged forward, pulling Ben with a force that was almost impossible to resist. His growl was louder now, a clear signal. Asterisk this way. Now! Asterisk. Contact. Northwest corner. Ben called out, allowing Coda to lead the way. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The beams of a dozen flashlights converged on the corner, illuminating a horrifying sight. A makeshift cage, constructed from chain-link fencing and reinforced with wooden planks, stood against the wall. Inside, huddled together for warmth and comfort, were 5 children. Their clothes were dirty, their faces pale and streaked with tears. Their eyes, wide with terror, blinked against the sudden invasion of light. One of the children, a boy who looked no older than 7, let out a choked cry and shrank back. Ben immediately dropped to one knee, pulling Coda back slightly to appear less threatening. "It's okay," he said, his voice soft but firm, cutting through the tension. "We're the police. We're here to take you home. You're safe now." The children stared, frozen between hope and disbelief. Coda, sensing their fear, let out a soft, pleading whine. Coda lay down. He crawled forward, his tail wagging slowly. He nudged the girl's fingers with his nose. The youngest of the group, a little girl with matted hair, slowly, hesitantly, reached a hand through the gaps in the fencing. Coda stretched his neck forward and gently nudged her fingers with his wet nose. That single touch broke the spell. "It's okay," the little girl whispered, turning to the others. "He's a good dog." At her words, the tense little group seemed to collectively exhale. The boy who had cried out began to sob with relief. Ben's heart felt like it was cracking open in his chest. He looked at the faces of these rescued children, then down at his partner, who was now patiently accepting timid pets from small, trembling hands. Coda had done it again. He hadn't just found them. He had bridged the gap of terror and shown them that safety had arrived. As the tactical team moved in to cut the lock on the cage, Ben keyed his mic, his voice thick with emotion. "Echo leader, we have visual on 5 children. All appear alive and unharmed. We are securing them now." But in the back of his mind, a cold thought lingered. The warehouse was too quiet. They had found the children, but where were the captors? The warehouse, once a tomb of silent fear, was now a hive of controlled chaos. Officers wrapped the rescued children in silver thermal blankets, their small hands clutching cups of water as paramedics began gentle assessments. The soft sounds of comforting words and relieved sobs filled the dusty air. For a moment, it felt like the mission was over, a victory snatched from the jaws of a terrible darkness. But Coda was not calm. While the children were being attended to, the German shepherd remained at the periphery of the rescue activity, his body tense. He wasn't watching the kids anymore. His head was cocked, his ears twitching at a frequency only he could discern. He paced a few steps toward a darkened corridor that led deeper into the warehouse's labyrinthine structure, then back to Ben, a low, anxious whine escaping his throat. "Easy, boy," Ben said, his own senses prickling. "What do you hear?" The dog's behavior was a stark contrast to his gentle interaction with the children. This was his hunting alert. The primary threat had been neutralized, but his instincts were screaming that danger was still present, and it was moving. Inspector Miller, noticed it too. "Walker, what's with your dog?" Before Ben could answer, a sharp, mechanical sound sliced through the relative quiet from outside. The distinct roar of a car engine turning over, followed by the screech of tires on asphalt. "Back entrance." "They're running," a voice shouted over the comms. The celebration inside the warehouse froze. The captors hadn't been inside with the children. They'd been using the main space as a holding cell while they stayed mobile, likely in a vehicle parked and ready for a swift exit. They had been watching, and now they were fleeing. Ben didn't hesitate. "Coda with me," he yelled. Sprinting toward the blown loading bay door, the dog a black streak at his side. They burst out into the cold night air just in time to see the red taillights of a black SUV disappearing down a narrow service road, swerving around piles of industrial debris. All units. Suspect vehicle fleeing east on Mercer Service Road. Black SUV, make and model unknown. Ben barked into his radio, already running full tilt after the vehicle. It was a futile chase on foot, but he knew he wasn't alone. Coda was already ahead of him, a four-legged engine of pure pursuit. Unleashed and driven by a deep-seated imperative to stop the threat, the German Shepherd became a creature of the night, his powerful legs pumping, his body low to the ground. The reflected glow of distant city lights glinted off his dark coat and the police insignia on his vest. He wasn't barking. He was saving his breath for the run, a silent, closing shadow. Ben followed, his boots pounding the wet pavement, his breath pluming in the cold air. He could hear the wail of sirens as other units converged, but the maze of alleys and dead ends in the industrial park made a direct intercept difficult. For now, it was just them, the dog and the fugitives. Ahead, the SUV took a hard right, its tires skidding on a patch of oil-slick concrete. The driver overcorrected, clipping a stack of wooden pallets that exploded into a shower of splinters. Coda never broke stride, leaping over the wreckage with an effortless, graceful power. "He's gaining!" Ben shouted into his mic, a surge of adrenaline and pride cutting through the exhaustion. "Coda is right on them." The driver, panicked by the relentless pursuit in his rear-view mirror, swerved violently again, trying to shake the dog. He slammed on the brakes for a split second, a brutal and desperate tactic. It was a mistake. Coda anticipated the move, veering to the side and using the SUV's momentary slowdown to launch himself forward. In a breathtaking display of agility and training, he leaped, his front paws landing on the rear bumper, his jaws closing on the driver's sleeve through the open window. A shout of pain and surprise echoed from the vehicle. The wheel was wrenched from the driver's grasp. The SUV veered sharply, mounted the curb, and slammed head-on into a chain-link fence with a deafening crash of buckling metal and shattering glass. The engine coughed and died, steam hissing from the crumpled hood. Ben reached the scene seconds later, his weapon drawn, his chest heaving. "Police, show me your hands," he yelled, his voice raw. Inside, the driver was dazed, clutching his arm where Coda's grip had torn the fabric. His passenger, a gaunt man with shaved head, was fumbling for something on the floor. Coda stood braced before the driver's door, his body a rigid, snarling wall of fury. His lips were pulled back, revealing his teeth, a guttural, continuous growl rolling from his chest, a sound that promised immediate and devastating violence if the man moved an inch. The passenger froze, slowly raising his hands as he looked into the dog's eyes. Don't let him get me," the driver stammered, his bravado completely shattered. Ben immediately went to Coda, placing a steadying hand on his back. "Release. Good boy. It's over." The transformation was instant. The savage growling stopped. The tension drained from Coda's muscles. He sat, panting heavily, his job complete. He looked up at Ben, his eyes soft again, and licked his handler's hand. Backup units screeched to a halt, surrounding the vehicle. Officers swarmed in, yanking the two men from the wreckage and slamming them onto the hood to be cuffed. As the two suspects were led away, the one with the torn sleeve looked back at Coda, a flicker of pure animal fear in his eyes. He hadn't been defeated by guns or badges, but by the unwavering will of a creature who understood justice in its purest form. Ben knelt in the damp alley, wrapping his arms around Coda's neck, burying his face in the dog's fur. The sounds of the city slowly returned, The sirens, the radios, the distant hum of traffic. They had started the day in the bright, noisy station, and they had ended it in a dark, silent alley, having traversed the entire spectrum of human cruelty and courage. And through it all, they had never been apart. The storm of the night had passed, leaving the city washed clean and quiet under the soft, pale light of a new day. At the makeshift command post near the warehouse, the frantic energy of the operation had settled into a steady, purposeful hum. The rescued children, now wrapped in blankets, were being carefully loaded into ambulances, their faces still marked by their ordeal, but their eyes now holding the first fragile sparks of hope. Ben leaned against the side of a patrol car, the adrenaline that had sustained him for the last 12 hours finally receding, leaving a profound exhaustion in its wake. He watched the scene, a deep, quiet satisfaction seeping into his bones. Coda sat beside him, similarly spent. The dog's head was lowered, his breathing even, his body still except for the occasional, contented thump of his tail against Ben's leg. The police vest was off, and he was just a dog again, a tired, loyal partner. A familiar social worker approached, a gentle smile on her face. "Officer Walker? Lily's parents are here. They'd like to see you." "And him, of course." Ben nodded, pushing himself upright. "Come on, buddy. Let's go finish this." They walked to a quieter area where a man and a woman stood, their faces raw with a sleepless, frantic hope. They clung to each other, their postures tense, as if afraid this entire reality might dissolve into a cruel dream. Then the door to one of the ambulances opened, and Lily stepped out, clutching a silver blanket around her shoulders like a cape. The moment of recognition was instantaneous. "Mommy, Daddy." Lily broke into a run. Her mother fell to her knees. They collided in a tangle of tears and desperate hugs. Her father wrapped his arms around both of them, his own tears flowing freely, murmuring words of love and comfort. It was a moment of such powerful humanity that the entire bustling scene seemed to pause. Ben stood back, giving the family their space, his hand resting firmly on Coda's head. The dog watched the reunion, his tail wagging in a slow, sweeping arc, understanding the profound shift in the air. The moment fear was finally, completely, replaced by love. After a long while, Lily's father approached Ben, his hand extended, his grip firm and trembling. "Officer, there are no words," he managed, his voice thick. "Thank you. Thank you for bringing our girl home." "It wasn't just me," Ben said, his voice rough with emotion. He looked down at Coda. He's the one who heard her, when the rest of us were just seeing a crowd. He saw a little girl in trouble. Lily, still holding her mother's hand, walked over to Coda. She knelt and wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. "Thank you, Coda," she whispered, her voice muffled. "You're my hero." Coda accepted the hug with soft, rumbling sound of contentment, licking the side of her face once gently. Lily's mother looked at Ben, her eyes full of gratitude so deep it was painful to behold. "We'll never forget this. Never. We have our daughter back because of you, too." As the family was guided toward a waiting car to be taken to the hospital for a final checkup, Lily turned and ran back one last time. She pressed something into Ben's hand, a small, hand-drawn heart on a crumpled piece of paper from a paramedic's notepad. "For Coda," she said, before skipping back to her parents. Ben looked down at the drawing, then at his partner. The city was waking up around them, the sun now fully above the horizon, painting everything in warm, golden light. The night's darkness, both literal and figurative, had been chased away. Inspector Miller walked over, clapping a hand on Ben's shoulder. "The DA is ecstatic. With the 2 we caught tonight and the information from Voss, we're dismantling the entire network. It's a career-making case, Ben. For both of you." Ben shook his head, looking at Coda, who was now lying down, chin on his paws, watching a pigeon with mild interest. "We didn't do it for the case, sir. We did it for her." He nodded toward the car, carrying Lily away. Miller smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "I know. That's what makes the difference." Alone again, Ben sat on the curb next to Coda, the fatigue settling deep into his muscles. He thought about the chain of events, a routine patrol, a dog's inexplicable focus, a silent tap of a hand. It was a fragile thread that, if missed, would have led to unimaginable darkness. But Coda had held on to it, and he refused to let go. "You know, buddy," Ben said softly, stroking the dog's ear. "Most people hear with their ears, but you hear with your heart." Coda lifted his head and placed his muzzle on Ben's knee, his deep brown eyes looking up with an expression of utter devotion. He let out a long, contented sigh. In the quiet of the morning, surrounded by the gentle sounds of the city returning to life, there was no need for barking or growling or commands. The greatest victories, Ben realized, often ended not with a roar, but with a peaceful silence shared between two partners who had once again proven that the most important language in the world is the one that doesn't need words.